All right. So what I did is I looked at this assignment, okay, and I started in the instructions, okay. So the first thing that we are told is we're going to look at the article. So the first thing is when you click on that link that says Living Beyond Our Means, then this article pops up and you're asked to read pages 6 through 10. So what I need you to do is to go ahead and open up that article and read pages essentially 7 through 10. What I'm going to do is go step by step through each of the problems that we have in the document. So you can track along with me. What I intend to do is to go ahead and do one using my example that I see, and then to give you a little bit of time to do the one you would do. So let's go through activity number 1. So it tells us that there are key messages which are like author's conclusions, okay? And in our document, these key messages are found on page 3. So let's go back to the document, go to page 3. By the way, the page 3 is the one in the document, okay? So here are the key messages. They're bulleted. And take a minute to read through these. While you're reading, you're looking to pick out one of the key messages that directly relates to something you read in the pages 6 through 10. So as you're reading through your key messages, see if you can pick out one that kind of relates to what you read. But I'm going to show you how I would do this next piece. So I'm going to pick one of the key messages that I think relates to something I read on pages 6 through 10. So, and when I do that, I'm going to paste it right here. So the one I picked was the second one. I'm literally just going to highlight it and copy it. And I'm going to drop it here in my document. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and finish the next 2 parts. And then I'll give you a chance to do yours. So after I choose one of the bullet points, then I want to find one piece of quantitative evidence. You may be thinking, oh, what's quantitative? So I want one piece of numerical, or one piece where we talked about greater than or less than, where we referred to numbers that supports this key message. So let me show you where I found mine. For bullet number 2, I went down to page 10. So if you'll scroll in your document to page 10, I found a lot of quantitative information on page 10, by the way, okay? And I found, it says humans have made unprecedented changes to the ecosystem in recent decades to meet growing demands for food, fresh water, fiber, and energy. So I am going to use this statement here that I found. It's a quantitative statement. I'm going to copy it and drop it in here. I picked a key message, one of the bullet points. I went to page 10 and found some quantitative information that kind of supports that. And then on my explanation, I'm going to do probably 2 sentences to kind of explain how this quantitative statement supports the key message. Okay? So you'll want to choose a different bullet point. Or if you choose the same bullet point I did, choose different quantitative evidence. Okay? And then 2 sentences of explanation. All right. So that part, pretty simple. 2 of them, the key message, you just had to copy and paste one of those bullet points. Then we went to page 10 in the document and we found a piece of quantitative evidence that supported that. And then your explanation, 2 sentences there of how your quantitative evidence supported the key message. Okay. Now that you have that done, let's look at the next one, which is to translate the key message that you just chose into an if-then statement. So I'm going to do mine. Okay, so remember that my key message was, I'm going to make it in some colorful print here. Humans have made unprecedented changes to ecosystems in recent decades to meet growing demands for food, fresh water, fiber, and energy. So I need to change this into an if-then statement like we did on Tuesday. So can I tell you before I do this one though that there is not one right answer. You could write an if-then statement that would work, and you could write kind of a lot of them. A little bit different, but I'm going to write one. Okay, so let me do that. So if the demands for food, fresh water, fiber, and energy grow, increase, then humans make changes to ecosystems. Remember the key phrases? I included the growing demands for food, fresh water, fiber, and energy. I also included the humans make changes to the ecosystems. Those were the two key phrases. I just had to organize them in an if-then fashion. Okay, now before I let you do yours, let's talk then about, okay, so the antecedent is a big formal word that just means the if part. So I can literally copy my if part, and the consequence, that's my then part. Oh, no, I didn't put then. There we go. Then humans make changes to ecosystems. There's my consequence. Okay? So again, that was my key message. I needed to rewrite my key message into an if-then statement. Then I need the antecedent to be my if part, the consequent to be my then part. So let us go to the next part, which is the next bullet. So our next bullet says, paraphrase another conditional or biconditional statement that is implied by the authors. So let's talk about this section though. Let me tell you the easiest way to do this one is to go back into the key messages, which is on page 3. The easiest way is to choose a different key message and write it as a conditional. Yeah. So I'm going to choose one. I'm going to choose this one. So I'm just going to paste it here just so I can see it. I love Word. Okay, so the pressures on ecosystems will increase globally in coming decades unless the human attitudes and actions change. Okay, so here's what I'm going to say, this conditional. I'm going to rewrite this statement as a conditional. If human attitudes and actions do not change, I intentionally put the not in there, okay? Then the pressures on ecosystems will increase globally. Okay, so all I did is I went back to the key messages and I chose a different one to write a conditional for. Okay, now it says, let's write these as logic statements. Okay, so I'm going to put my symbols in here. I'm going to say, because in the first one I did not, human attitudes and actions do not change, so that's a negative. The way I do a negative is a little tilde. That's what that symbol is called. It's a little curve here. The way you do that on your keyboard, I do shift, and then it's the button above the tab is how I get that little tilde. Okay. And that means not. P, meaning statement P, implies, so I did a little arrow, Q, statement Q. Now, if yours is not negative, like if you don't use a not, then you don't need the little tilde, okay? But the The arrow means if then. Okay, so we're rewriting another key message as an if then statement, and your logic symbols are going to be either not P arrow Q or P arrow Q. So if you don't use a not, you don't need the little tilde, but you still need the P arrow Q. But let's take a look at the next part, which says, so this is at the top of page 3, if you're tracking with us, says the last component of activity 1. It says, choose one of the graphs in the passage that addresses the key message you selected. And then summarize the message of the graph and write a conditional based on your summary. State the antecedent and consequent, which is the if and the then part. Okay, so we're going to choose one of the graphs. Now the graphs were on page 6, 7, 8, and 9. Okay, you're going to choose one of them. I'm going to choose 6, the one on 6, just because, just for simplicity's sake. And I need to write a conditional that is in this graph. And we need to write an if-then statement from this graph. So something I might say, just to give you an example, if you live in the mountain and polar region, then you have access to food and fresh water. An if and a then that I get from this graph. You could easily write a different one, a different if, a different then. This is just one I found, okay? And then, just like we did before with the key message, we pick out the if part for the antecedent. That's the you live in the mountain and polar region. And then the consequence, you have access to fresh food and water. Now, you can choose the graph on page 6 or 7 or 8 or 9. Write a conditional from that graph and then pick out your if, pick out your then. All right. So good question here. Someone brought up, it says, summarize the message of the graph and write a conditional or biconditional statement based on your summary. You are summarizing for yourself. There's no need to actually write that summary, okay? The only thing you're writing is completing the chart just like I did, okay? But great question someone brought up there. All right, we've got a few more minutes. I want to focus in on this last part, activity 2. And it is talking about inductive and deductive reasoning, okay? So let's talk about inductive first. Inductive makes broad general statements from specific observations. Let me say that again so you can get it as your explanation. Inductive makes broad, generalized statements from specific observations. Okay, let me give you my example. Okay, my son's bus ran late yesterday getting home. Okay, so that's a specific observation. My son's bus was late getting home. I could make a generalized statement that all buses in this school district run late. That is inductive reasoning. I had one instance where my son's bus ran late, and I make a conclusion or I make a generalized statement that all buses in this school district run late. Give an example for inductive. Start with a specific one-time instance and then make a broad general statement. Whether that broad general statement is true or not is not important. So remember, in inductive. We start with one example, one specific case, and we make a broad statement, okay? Deductive goes the other way. We start with a broad statement and we make a specific conclusion. Let me give you an example here. Bachelors are unmarried men. That's a general statement, right? Bill is unmarried. So Bill is a bachelor. Do you see how we went from all bachelors are unmarried men down to a specific case that if Bill is unmarried, Bill is a bachelor? That's our example. So let me go over that deductive explanation again. Deductive starts with a general statement and makes a specific case conclusion. So see if you can make an example like I did about bachelors or unmarried men. So if Bill is unmarried, Bill is a bachelor. And then you're making an example. Different than mine. You can make one similar, but should be a little bit different. Activity 2, bullet 2, says on page 10 of the article, in the converse and degradation section, the article makes this factual evidence. Or it states this as factual evidence. Since about 1980, approximately 35% of mangroves have been lost, while 20% of the world's coral reefs have been destroyed, and a further 20% badly degraded or destroyed. One possible conclusion could be, given this trend, the threat of damage from coastal storms and tidal waves will increase in the future. So here's what you need to decide. Is this inductive, where I start with one example and then make a general statement? Or is this deductive, where I make a general statement and then apply it to one instance? If the first statement here, the easiest way to decide this is the statement I have in pink general or specific? If it's general, then we know that this is deductive reasoning because we start with a general statement. If this statement in pink is a specific instance, then our reasoning is inductive because we start with a specific instance and then we make a general statement. So I'm going to let you decide which one that is and then explain how you know it's inductive or deductive. But let's look at the last example or the last part of activity 2. That is the bullet that's on page number 4. It says to create your own example of inductive or deductive reasoning based on another bullet point from the facts and figures of ecosystem change on page 10. So let's go to page 10. Take a look. Here's all those facts. Remember, we got a lot of quantitative evidence here in one of our previous problems. So we're going to choose one of the bullet points. It doesn't matter which one. I'm going to choose this one. The flow of nitrogen to the oceans has doubled since 1860. Okay. That's a pretty broad statement, right? So remember, when we start with a broad statement and then we go to a specific instance, that is deductive. Specific case. Now, What is our conclusion then? Okay, so we start with the flow of nitrogen to the oxygens has doubled since 1860. Now I need a specific case. The amount of oxygen or nitrogen, not oxygen, the amount of nitrogen flowing to the oceans is in, let's see, 2021 will be more than the amount of nitrogen flowing to the oceans, and that's a lot, in 1860. Do you see how I went to a specific year? Okay, I started with a general statement. The flow of nitrogen to the oceans has doubled since 1860, and I put it to a specific year. The amount of nitrogen flowing to the ocean this year will be more than the amount of nitrogen flowing to the ocean in 1860. Okay, and again, it's deductive because we start with a general statement and we apply it to a specific case. Now, you'll need to do the same. You can choose one of these bullet points and write your conclusion, decide if it is inductive or deductive reasoning.